Part 1. Real Economy. Growth Risks and Growth Boosts. Chapter 3. How Cycles Die. Few economists saw the 2008 crisis coming. The 2020 recession struck without advance warning. In 2022, many rushed to call the next recession, albeit incorrectly. The following year, a U.S. recession was described as inevitable in countless headlines, yet it failed to land in 2023. The lack of predictability, even a few short months out, is stark. Realistically, the only certainty about future recessions is their uncertainty. Learning from prediction failures, ever better data, and growing analytical sophistication have still not moved us closer to the goal of reliably forecasting downturns. Executives and investors must be clear-eyed that this isn't going to change. Yet leaders don't have the luxury of ignoring these debates. In fact, the risk of a recession is often top of mind when the economy is growing. And while executives won't be able to call the next downturn with precision, they can develop an understanding of the underlying drivers and risks. This chapter introduces listeners to the economy's cyclical risk profile. Rather than engaging in binary framing, will there be a recession or not, or top-down probabilities, for instance, 61% risk of recession over the next 12 months, near the consensus probability for much of 2022 and 2023, we teach listeners how to assess, isolate, and compare the drivers and dynamics of recession. It doesn't provide a reliable forecast, but it is the first step to developing that power of judgment that we emphasized in chapters 1 and 2. A cornerstone of the cyclical risk profile is the recognition that recessions are not homogeneous, but come in 3 types. By differentiating among real recessions, policy-induced recessions, and financial recessions, we can build a structural risk profile that is relatively stable across cycles. It helps us shift our perception of recession risk away from top-down predictions and toward causes, relative probabilities, and narratives. This approach provides a baseline of and proclivities for recession risk and can be used to evaluate tactical prospects for a recession in the near term. And, as we'll learn in Chapter 4, it also helps in assessing prospects of recovery. The risk profile of the modern cycle. On any given day, one can obtain current recession probabilities. Some of these come from statistical probit models based on financial market inputs. For example, the yield curve probit, a popular recession gauge, derives recession risk from the difference between short-term interest rates and longer-dated ones. Other forecasts use data from surveys of consumers and managers, movements in commodity markets, or measurements of the opinions of economists. The idea that we can collapse the whole spectrum of influences and risks into a single number is seductive. But one trouble is that such measures are hopelessly volatile. We can check the numbers one day and find that they have swung wildly the next. They are not a reliable input into strategic planning or tactical decision-making. As a result, top-down recession probabilities are often a source of frustration for executives and investors alike. Instead, we should approach recession risk analysis with simple questions. What is the background risk of recessions? How common are recessions? Where do they come from? Do they differ substantially? How do cycles die? In other words, more understanding, less predicting.